It's funny how life can throw you curveballs when you least expect it. One moment I was living the dream, comfortable, secure, maybe a bit too comfortable, and the next I was staring down the barrel of a crisis that would turn my whole world upside down. I'm Frank Castle, a guy who spent years serving my country, trading the chaos of the battlefield for the quiet of suburban life in Trenton Hills. But all that peace came crashing down when I crossed paths with Karen Jameson, the HOA president with a vendetta and a penchant for power. I remember what people used to say about me back when I was just trying to fit in as a civilian. A nice guy, sure, but sometimes a little too passive, a little too willing to let things slide. My buddies from the service would joke that I needed to toughen up, but I couldn't shake the fear that standing up for myself would only stir trouble. And here I was, a devoted husband and veteran, suddenly faced with a choice: stay silent or confront someone who thought they could twist rules to suit their own agenda. That fateful day, I spotted her Karen smugly parked in a handicapped space, completely disregarding the rules she enforced so strictly on everyone else. My heart raced. I knew I should say something, but the weight of what it meant to confront that power was nearly paralyzing. Little did I know my decision would ignite a battle for justice that would change everything. I still remember that day vividly, the day everything changed. It was just an ordinary Tuesday, or at least that's what I thought. I had finally reported Karen for illegally parking in a handicapped space. And I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd found the courage to stand up against her tyranny. But then came the backlash. I hadn't expected her retaliation to be so swift, so merciless. An HOA notice slipped under my door. Violation: altering property without approval. I read those words a dozen times, disbelief clawing at my insides. I knew my backyard fence wasn't the issue here. She was coming after me. The phone call from my boss cut deeper than any of her petty fines. Frank, we need to let you go. The HOA is threatening to turn this into a PR nightmare. His voice felt cold, devoid of any understanding. It's just business, as if my whole life were nothing more than a flickering light that could be turned off at will. Am I supposed to just take this? My voice trembled as I fought to keep my anger in check. Frank, we appreciate your service, but we can't have this kind of negative attention. It's for the best. The phone call ended, but the betrayal lingered like a heavy fog. I felt hollowed out, unceremoniously tossed aside for doing what was right. I sank onto my couch, the weight of it crushing. My wife, Linda, her face drawn in worry, couldn't find the words. Will you let her win? She whispered the question, lingering between us like tension in the air. I looked at her and saw my own resolve mirrored in her eyes. I might have lost my job, but there was one thing: I refused to lose my fight for justice. Sometimes the world feels like it wants to laugh at you, like you're some foolish David standing against a Goliath that no one else can see. But I wouldn't be laughed down. Not now. Not ever. In that moment, I realized just how much I had to lose and how determined I was to take it all back. Honestly, things just spiraled from there. I kept trying to stand up to Karen, and each attempt was like throwing a pebble at a brick wall. Admirable in theory, but utterly useless in practice. She hit back with a tidal wave of absurd HOA violations. I swear one notice claimed my lawn was out of compliance because the grass blades were too tall. Apparently, I needed to cut it every Tuesday at precisely 4 p.m. under the full moon. Who knew I was such a slacker? Then the notices turned personal. We'd be minding our own business, and the doorbell would ring, a neighbour turning Karen's petty vendettas into neighbourhood gossip. I felt like I was getting stalked by an overzealous PTA. Did you hear about Frank? Can you believe he complained about Karen? Yeah, oh, the horror. I dared to expect basic decency. And speaking of horror, Officer Daniels, bless his heart, was my only lifeline. He'd swing by with a sympathetic nod like you're onto something, Frank. But let's be real here. His kindness was like offering water while we were miles from a desert oasis. Yet at least I had someone to share my frustration with. A little support really does lighten the load. But just as I thought I might finally get a break, there came that moment, a flicker of hope, as I discovered Karen's little scheme was far dirtier than I ever imagined. It was like finding a light switch in pitch blackness, but boy, flipping that switch came at a cost. I found myself thinking, great Frank, now you're not just a homeowner, you're a target. Welcome to the underbelly of suburban warfare, folks. Who knew tragedy could be this ridiculous? If only I'd signed up for a yoga class or something instead. But no, I had to resist the Karen. The camera narrows on Frank sitting alone in his dimly lit living room. Papers scatter across the table like the shards of his crumbling resolve. The weight of regret hangs heavy. Voiced over. He was tired, worn down. Every violation notice a paper cut deep and stinging. Every cold glare from Karen a reminder of every battle lost. But then, that night, beneath the flickering kitchen light, Frank's phone buzzed a message from Officer Daniels. The words ignited a flicker, an ember of hope. Let's meet. I've got something. In his gut, a pull, a decision to confront the darkness, not run from it. Everything he feared, retaliation, loss, it didn't matter anymore. He had a chance. There was a moment in the silence when the storm within him calmed. He thought of the disabled veteran the family's wronged. A whisper transformed into a roar. If the system he trusted was broken, he would help fix it. The next day, he drove to that rundown diner. Met Daniels in a booth sharing secrets like conspirators dissecting Karen's empire of lies. Frank leaned in, a newfound strength coursing through him as they mapped out their strategy. One piece of evidence at a time, fragile threads that would unravel her. And suddenly it clicked. He wasn't just a soldier fighting a neighborhood war. He was a fighter, lightning in his veins. The desperation faded, replaced by unyielding resolve. He turned toward the road, driving through the suburban streets, ghosts of doubt left behind. There was no turning back. Every bump in the road faded, and in its place a fire ignited. Justice would rise from the ashes of despair. This time he would be unstoppable. As the boardroom filled with anticipation, the air crackled with tension. Frank Castle stood at the front, flanked by Linda and Officer Daniels, his heart pounding not from fear, but from purpose. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glow on the faces of the homeowners, eyes narrowed in skepticism toward the trio. But Frank was unyielding. "Before you make any decisions," he began, voice steady but fierce, "you deserve to know the truth." He placed the projector remote in his palm, his hand steady despite the weight of the moment, as he clicked to life the damning evidence he had meticulously gathered. The room darkened, and the grainy footage of Karen's henchmen defacing his property filled the screen. Gasps erupted. Whispers of disbelief rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Frank watched as Karen's confident facade shattered her carefully crafted perception as the community's moral compass crumbling before her. Faces that once turned away from Frank in compliance now glanced back at him in solidarity, a wave of realization washing over the crowd. He could almost feel the collective breath as their corners of justice converged. Minutes later, as the police arrived to escort Karen out, a great weight lifted from Frank's shoulders. The handshakes that followed weren't just gestures of gratitude. They were affirmations of their shared resilience. A quiet smirk crossed Frank's lips, reflecting an unspoken sentiment, "I did it." But as the applause filled the room, echoing off the walls, he knew that this victory didn't erase the scars left behind. It simply made them worth it, a testament to the battles fought and the strength built along the way. The fight for justice was far from over, but today they stood taller than ever before, and that was enough. As the dust settles on Trenton Hills, I find myself pondering the true nature of justice. Frank Castle began this journey as a man weighed down by the remnants of his past, but he emerged as a beacon of resilience. In confronting the arrogance of power embodied by Karen Jameson, he embraced a fundamental truth: sometimes standing up for what's right demands a personal cost. He learned that trust can be as fragile as glass, easily shattered by betrayal, yet capable of being mended through collective action. But I can't help but wonder, when does the fight for justice tip into the pursuit of revenge? Was Frank an avenger, or simply a defender of the downtrodden? In our quest for justice, can the lines become blurred? This debate ignites fervor. Some will argue that revenge is a necessary tool to balance the scales, while others will insist that justice can only be served with compassion and integrity. In the end, Frank's journey forces us to confront our own beliefs about power and retribution. Are we willing to sacrifice our principles for a taste of vengeance? Or can we rise above embodying the very ideals we seek to uphold? As you reflect on Frank's transformation and the repercussions of his choices, I invite you to share your thoughts. Have you faced a similar struggle in your own community? Let's discuss what justice means to you and whether it can ever be considered justifiable to pursue revenge. Sometimes the most impactful battles are fought not by a sword or a fist, but within our own hearts.